Catch up on all the live shows right here on africatechradio.com.
Welcome to this episode powered by Prembly and Africa Tech Radio on emerging fraud trends, strategies for proactive prevention. In this episode, the significance of biometric authentication in countering identity theft and account takeover will be discussed, with emphasis on the importance of strengthening anti-fraud efforts through information exchange. The panelists for this discussion would be the Director of Service Delivery at Ethnos Cyber Limited, Goodness Okpani, the Infrastructure and Cloud Engineer at Prembly, and Infrastructure and Cloud Engineer at Prembly, Ileri Fadeyi, and Cybersecurity Engineer at CyberSOC Africa, Farouk Musa. And the moderator for this panel session is Caleb Goodness Ibe, Lead Information Security Analyst, SeedFi, and SOC and Incident Response Trainer at Cybersafe. This webinar also delves into the benefits and challenges of data sharing to proactively combat fraud across industries. Take a listen.
So, Goodness Okpani, in your experience, what are the most significant technology-related challenges when combating fraud? And in your position as a CTO, how have you addressed them?
All right. Thank you very much, my namesake, Goodness. And I'm so happy that I have a namesake, Goodness, on this platform. So I think we should just call each other namesakes. Thank you very much, ATR, for arranging this session. For me, in experience, especially when it comes to fraud management, fraud prevention, of course, it's not a new topic. One of the challenges that we have seen, especially within a Nigerian context, is the fact that humans will always be our issue. The banks have to deal with them every time. So, when it comes to cybersecurity, for example, they say that best of processes, you can have the best of technology, but you can never really have the best of humans. So humans, or the people, will continue to be the most important in an organization, as well as the weakest in the chain of cybersecurity. And that is always one of the major reasons that we have. In fact, we have so many instances where, even with all of the various awareness campaigns that are being done, you find more and more people still falling prey to the same fraudulent campaigns that we see very commonly. In fact, we have a CISO, one of the CISO meetings once mentioned to me that a person, for example, would receive an email from his bank telling him, please don't give out your PIN or password to someone, and he will never read it. However, if somebody sends him on that same phone a text message saying, we have credited you with so and so amount, please go, that is what moves him. So you will not blame people. The economy, it's not smiling, the environment is not smiling, all of that. So again, that will continue to present its challenge, the human factor. Now, another thing that again, it's another challenge that we see, especially with regard to implementation of solutions, is false positives. Okay, so a lot of fraud detection and prevention solutions must have been put in place, but then again, you start to see a lot of false positives with some of these solutions. Again, because you're trying to manage user experience with security of applications and trying to integrate fraud prevention or detection solutions. One of the issues with regard to that is the fact that from time to time, you begin to see a lot of false positives, especially when it comes to traditional fraud detection solutions. And because of the prevalence of this false positive, especially because of the fact that these fraud detection solutions have not been able to differentiate between actual, real, verified persons or customers and those who have come and steal from the machine. That margin of error is very important, is very key. And so people it becomes more and more difficult for people to begin to adopt and accept the usage of fraud detection solutions for their work. Another major challenge with the fact that as we progress, technologies continue to evolve. In the past, we used to have identity fraud, for example, credit card fraud and tax fraud, all the different frauds, you can name it. And we usually have a lot of them. But what has happened? I mean, why these fraud conversations regarding fraud have become prevalent? is because of the fact that we have begun to adopt more and more technologies to able to automate the traditional processes that we used to have. And so identity have shifted from physical to digital. So you now have digital identities in the digital space as against physical identities that you will have. Organizations would invest in the beginning in perimeter-based security solutions like your firewall, for example, network firewall, and all of the reservation firewalls that you use to protect your environment for people not to come in, because people usually go and try to hack and try to enter into the system. In recent times, all those perimeter-based security solutions have become obsolete, like because hackers in recent times don't stress themselves to try to hack their way into an organization or try to create fraudulent transactions by way of trying new evolved methods. No, it just simply adopts a person's identity, a trusted person's identity, and commit fraud. All right. So, and that again has become the challenge: how to be able to manage identity security for customers. And of course, with every challenge, there's always solutions. And one of the things that we always talk about in recommendation for management of identity security. So identity security is a fundamental core of everything fraud, managing the identities of people, identity security. So in managing that, you want to implement, again, use technologies. But before using technologies, the first and most important thing is to work on the people, all right? Work on the people. Rather than focusing more on your perimeter network firewall, you want to focus more on the human firewall. So your humans have to become the firewall as your your first line of defense. So awareness campaigns can never be said to stop. And again, these awareness campaigns should not be something that we do based just to complete a compliance checklist. We want to make it targeted. I always talk to organizations that carry out awareness campaigns for the organization, banks and the rest. I say, don't just roll out awareness campaigns simply because you want to do it. So in a month, you just send it out. Okay, today we're only going to focus on so and so. This is the topic for today, but they go and start reading up on it. No, it has to be targeted. So why don't you start with carrying out a simulated phishing campaign? A simulated phishing campaign is like a test phishing campaign on your employees. Let's even see the people who actually fall prey in my organization. That tells me the gap I actually see. So, and I can be able to work on that gap. So, if, for example, in my organization, I have 3,000 staff, for example, I don't want to just keep on rolling out campaigns for 3,000 staff. I want to first start by doing a gap assessment, roll out a simulated phishing campaign, roll out phishing simulator for my customer or even for my staff, and let me even try to see where the gaps do exist. All right, before I am now able to say, okay, out of this 3,000, I am now going to focus my attention on 1,000 or 2,000 or 500 staff who have actually fallen prey to this particular phishing campaign, and that helps to actually stop or curb that particular problem when it comes to awareness. And that's one part. The second, again, is employing the use of technology. So you see, technology is like it's like a tale of two forces. All right, in every movie, you always have the actor, the villain, and the hero. Yeah, most times there's always two people. So the hero will never be the villain, and the villain will never be the hero. And we know how movies always end up. The hero always wins, and all of that. Never real. But in the use of technologies, for example, artificial intelligence and machine learning, these two can also can function in those two roles. They can the use of technology can be both a villain and a hero. It depends on what you're using. So why the fraudulent attackers use technology to be able to advance in their way of combating fraud strategies. Organizations, and again, those who run the technology for organizations will begin to adopt artificial intelligence as a way of combating fraudulent transactions. And artificial intelligence, and more importantly, machine learning, because artificial intelligence is it's not really complete except it is machine learning power, because and that helps you to able to reduce false positive, which is one of the challenges we talked about with a common fraud detection solutions, because you don't want to start blocking or start preventing. The first thing you want to do is to start learning your users, start learning your customers, start understanding their profiles, build a profile-based and risk-based profile for your customers so that you understand their behaviors, and in the event you have a customer or a person who assumes that identity and begins to carry out transactions, you can able to compare the behavior of the one versus the other based on what you have gathered from the identity of the verified person. So again, these are some of the things we always recommend sharing to organizations to be able to implement.
Thank you very much, Goodness. I particularly like what you said about your use as actually being your first line of defense. Like I always tell people, you can actually invest as much as you want to into your security infrastructure, but if the end users of those of that particular security infrastructure are not aware of risks, are not aware of loopholes, it just renders your security budget useless, because you can purchase the best firewalls, the best endpoint security solutions. If people are not aware of security threats and how they can actually come in, all of those things will actually not offer the solutions you want them to offer. Back to you, Ileri. Now, we've actually heard so much about the fraud campaigns, we've heard so much about the social engineering attacks. Now, how can individuals and organizations in Nigeria better educate themselves about social engineering tactics to help them prevent against fraud?
Okay, so just taking off what Goodness has said, I don't think you can have enough awareness campaigns. I think that's always the first level. For an individual, we owe it to people to actually get this information out there. Let people make this information available for just the everyday person, ensuring that they know that these tactics exist and how they can prevent them. I feel like the saving, or one of the key factors that would save a person from a fraudulent attack or a social engineering attack would be having information, knowing that this is an attack, being able to identify that this is an attack and being able to avoid the attack. Then, like I said, making online resources, trainings, and cybersecurity trainings available, just so that people have the awareness. The awareness is very, very key on an individual level. But when you move to organizations, right, as an organization, firstly, the first line of defense is always your employees. You could do every single thing you like. You could have the best security facilities and everything. If an employee should fall prey to these attacks, then you are vulnerable. So the first thing is actually having employee trainings. And I know it's a normal thing in every organization to actually have employee awareness trainings, but it doesn't end there, because most of these employee trainings are just to satisfy, oh yes, we train our employees. But I think, like Goodness mentioned, simulating these attacks internally, sending out a phishing email, just see who are the people in my organization that are vulnerable to this kind of attack, and then educating those people. Obviously, you still educate at large, but educating, making sure, pointing focus at those kind of people that you know that are susceptible to this kind of attacks. And you have, obviously, your security policies have to be top notch and they have to be followed. It's one thing to have your policies written, but you have to enforce these policies. Multi-factor authentication also. You do not want a situation whereby once a user's, for example, password and email is compromised, the user's identity is compromised. You want to have 2 levels at least of authentication. So if it's a form of MFA, maybe Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, you need to have those. You have to have an incident response plan, very importantly, because it's one thing to be able to, or to try and prevent these things, but how do you respond? How do you act when these things happen? How fast can you prevent a spread? How fast can you prevent a cybersecurity attack from being a full-blown downtime? You need to be able to have your incident response plans in place. Then you need to have regular assessments of your system, because whether you like it or not, we are human beings, and human beings are prone to, mistakes, whether by negligence or even deliberately. There's always a gap. These regular assessments would ensure that gaps are identified before an actual issue occurs. Then obviously information is the savior in this point. You need to be able to share this information. If there's an incident, I think raising awareness to your peers would actually help, so that they don't fall victim to these same attacks So that's about it for me.
Thank you very much, Larry. Over to you, Nelson. I don't think we have people speaking so much about threat intelligence and the importance of threat intelligence in combating fraud in Nigeria. In your opinion, how important is information exchange between various industries for strengthening anti-fraud efforts, and what are the key challenges we've actually experienced in this space?
Okay, thank you so much, Goodness. In fact, I think, like I used to tell a lot of my friends, when it comes to cybersecurity, visibility and information sharing is very key. Like we will do very little when we don't share information. And I think before now, one of the biggest issues that we've had in Nigeria is that different key industries don't have threat intelligence platform, like maybe a centralized KYC platform, that is headed or, let's say spearheaded like by organization like the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System, especially in the financial sector. Because I think that what is happening right now is that a lot of our organizations, using the financial sector as a case study, is that we are doing a lot of intelligence independently. And let me give a case study. Maybe there's a fraudulent attempt in a particular bank, by somebody, and this same person is trying to, carry out the same attempt in other banks, right? What is the possibility of these other banks getting to know, So I think right now, what aside from the quarterly meetings that are held by CISOs, I think that's one of those things that we are doing now that is helping the industry. Where there's always like a regular quarterly meetings, or where CISOs get to meet and discuss, right? But I think in real time, one of the issues that we have is that we don't have a real time platform for threat intelligence that will help us, kind of block these attacks. It's not when they did it's already done, then we are having a meeting to discuss and say, okay, what's the way forward, right? But I think that we should have, like, I know one of the challenges around this kind of thing is regulatory, because if there's a fraud case in a particular bank, it's you cannot just start revealing people's information. But I think we can come up with the kind of information that can be revealing to help other institutions within that same space, have an idea so that we are able to fight this fraud, proactively. I think the method we are using right now is a kind of reactive method. So to answer your question, having like a centralized information sharing platform, would help us, reduce fraud, provided that we can trust each other. I think that one of the other issues is in the area of trust. If different organizations within a particular sector, let's say the financial and the fintech industry, have a robust platform, I think there's something like that in the States that is spearheaded by the FBI. They have this platform where different CEOs and business owners get to register, and over time you get tips of what is happening. I'm not so sure if we have platforms like that, but I know in the States there is that. So you get to see real time based on intelligence from maybe the FBI. So you know how to better prepare your environment proactively. So, and especially in the part of having like a centralized, I don't know how possible that is, right? But from a security point of view, if there's like a centralized KYC platform, such that before a customer is onboarded for a business, right? Either in a fintech or in a bank, you want to do risk assessment, instead of doing this individually with this, we have these different banks doing individually with this partner, the partner already have this done. It's uploaded in a centralized. So the follow-up activities will now be confirmation to confirm that, the details that you provided on this platform, confirm that it is the same thing that you have, like what we are trying to do with NIM and trying to consolidate information. I think that is where it's going to help us from an organization point of view in terms of threat investigation and detection. So one of the things around biometrics is that it's mostly serves as like a double factor authentication, and I think the emergence of biometrics, especially on mobile applications, and also for applications that you get to interface directly with, not just mobile. I think it's going to reduce a lot of data breaches, because if you look at it, it's right. There was a recent report I was reading from Microsoft, and it says that multi-factor authentication would reduce or would solve over 80% of attacks, especially from social engineering, right? And I think the best, to answer your question, it's going to reduce the rate of fraud that we have. Like, for example, in the first quarter of this year, you would also notice that because of the cashless policy, there's been an increase in the rate of fraud. Now, and if you look at the rate of successful social engineering attack or fraud, right, you will notice that these attacks were successful because there were no multi-factor authentication or biometrics. So I think it for mobile applications that we are using because of the cashless policy, wallets, e-payment system, the use of biometrics should be encouraged more, aside from just using your username and password or your 4-digit PIN, because it's going to reduce the rate of data breaches across this platform. The first speaker spoke about phishing, various phishing attacks, various forms of social engineering attacks, and those are like the first attack vectors. But when it's now coming to the usage of your applications, to make transactions, having biometric as an additional layer of authentication, right, would prevent a lot of attack. I would say by 90%, because in reality right now, multi-factor authentication, including biometrics, actually reduces any form of cyber attack, especially the ones that are, directly to applications, your social media accounts. Once you have some sort of 2FA, but biometric in particular would reduce drastically, because that seems to be like one of the strongest form of authentication. I think it's going to reduce it drastically, and that's what I think, because a lot of people just have your compromised username and password. Ibe, over to you. I don't know if I'm able to answer your question correctly.
Yes, you actually did. I think I particularly like what you mentioned about trust.
Goodness, what advice can you give to other CTOs in terms of aligning technology initiatives with their company's fraud prevention goals and objectives?
All right, thank you so much. I think first of all, starting out on the fraud prevention journey, one of the things that CTOs would want to do is to define objectives, and that is key, because if objectives are not clearly set, it will be difficult to be able to measure how far we have come and how far the organization has matured as a way of combating fraud cases. And again, the context, the objectives differ based on organizations. Earlier in this conversation, I think that's Ileri or Nelson, I don't know, talked about the various types of fraud, because we talk about fraud generally, but again, it's context driven. For the banks, what they will consider fraud really is credit card fraud. For the tax office, for example, there is tax fraud. We have insurance fraud. We have then the general identity fraud that happens to everyone. So when organizations are setting out objectives, they want to set out objectives vis-a-vis the peculiar fraud cases that they're actually doing. And that will mean aligning what you're going to set out as your fraud prevention strategy with what the business objectives are. So that's why it's important that the CTO or chief technology officer of an organization, or whoever is running managing security, will want to understand first what exactly are my organization's business objectives. Okay, let me understand what exactly do they face, or what exactly are their issues. So he's able to define objectives and align them to what the business objectives of the organization are, and that is one. Secondly, and next, which is also important, well, I'll not dwell on that, is to be able to identify people, people within the organization that will become his champions, so to say, or his ambassadors for combating fraud within the organization. Banks today are a case study because, again, within Nigerian context, people really engage in fraudulent attacks. All these hackers, for example, carry out fraud. I think that in many institutions around the world, people have different motives. The motives really are different when people carry out fraudulent activities. For some, they just carry it out as a way of show of force, just to show that yes, we have better, your security defenses are weak, all of that. In Nigeria and of course in Africa, the trend is usually the fact that people just carry this out as a way of just making money. So money is really the end goal for hackers and attackers here. So they carry out for the fraud activities as a way of attacking the money, and that is why banks are the most targeted when it comes to fraudulent activities. So the organizations such as banks would want to create some sort of champions, whether it's champions across the different departments within the organization, and be able to empower these champions, giving them the skills needed for them to be able to identify, detect, and also prevent these cyber threats from happening. Because this is the more people we have in the fighting force, the better it is. So it's not just left for the city alone to be able to engage in this war against fraud for the organization. So that's another thing. So having an army of people is usually very important. Identification of those people across the organization, one person across selected critical areas in the organization will also serve to help, as my experience. Creation of policies and procedures is something else that they want organizations, especially those running cybersecurity or information security or CTOs, who want to look at. So you have policies and procedures that are established for your organization, how to manage fraud. What are risk ratios? I think, as you mentioned, I've talked about risk because you see everything that we speak about cybersecurity is all tied to your risk. So you want to be able to create for yourself your risk management procedure or framework aligned to your organization, and take input from other risk management frameworks like your 27005 or your 31000 that speaks to ISO 31000 framework. So again, you want to take inputs from there and create a robust risk management framework as a set guide or procedure for the organization. So it is that framework that is now going to help organizations as they begin to implement it, whatever, whether it's the application that is being used across their internet banking, the customer facing sites, or whatever that is being used for carrying out services to the organizations. Then again, of course, technology. So putting in place technology is key. Putting in place technology, and again, we keep on talking about the fact that when shopping for, I mean, when going to go and shop for fraud detection solutions, because most times it's the responsibility of the CTO or the CISO to go out there, especially when they have to deal with frauds relating to credit card or identity fraud activities. They go and shop for fraud detection solutions or fraud prevention solutions. I always tell people that it is important that you understand your use case scenarios, all right, before going out there to go and shop, so that you don't end up buying the wrong solution. All right, and it could be wrong. It could be wrong, not necessarily because the solution or the product itself is wrong or is not doing, or because it's not just aligning to what you really want. So one of the things you want to do first, before even shopping for technology solutions to be able to achieve your purpose, is to create or come up with use case scenarios. One very important use case scenario that you can come up with would be something as simple as monitoring a user, for example. So if today your customer logs on to the internet banking platform today by what's the time now? This is 4:44, for example. Carries out a transaction, and he logs in from Lagos, for example. Then 3 or 5 minutes later, we find the same login from that same customer somewhere as far as Singapore or the United States. That is a problem. Again, that becomes a use case scenario for you. So that will now that will be something that you want to say, okay, I'm going to use this use case scenario to look for a fraud detection solution that can be able to prevent that kind of scenario from happening, because you know that it is highly impossible, unless you have become a magician, to carry out transaction here in Lagos and 5 minutes later you are in another country, even in another state here in Lagos. I mean, Lagos and Abuja, 5 minutes. I mean, how come? Is that possible? All right. So that would be a very fine use case scenario for you for going to go and shop for a fraud detection solution, and that will help. Okay, so building your fraud prevention strategy, defining a fraud prevention strategy that aligns to the business objectives of the organization, establishing a team. I used to call them your risk team, your risk champions, or your security champions, whatever you want to call the name, whatever you want the name to be. Is also key. Developing policies or procedures, especially the risk management framework, is key. And then identifying solutions, identifying technologies, or especially technologies that align to your specific use case, is very important, because we will use those use cases to now carry out assessment against 1, 2, 3, 4 products that you want to now buy, and see how those products handle those use case scenarios, and then you would have brought the right fit technology to solve your current problem. Over to you.
Thank you very much, goodness. So, Ileri, you work with Prembly, and Prembly provides solutions for identity verification, right? Now, can you share specific examples of successful biometric authentication implementations in Nigeria that have actually helped in the reduction of fraud incidents?
So you have a couple of them. You have the BVN implementation. You have the BVN implementation. You have the telecom sector policy that makes you have to register your SIM card, right? Those kind of things. Basically, what it does is that it ties a biometric identity to a human being. So, for example, before implementation of the telecom sector policy, what would happen is I could walk into any store and just get a SIM card, commit any kind of crime I would have loved to commit on it because, well, it was untraceable back to me, and then get a new SIM card. But now, what happens is if you walk into a store to get a SIM card, you would probably have to get registered, and that registration process takes your biometric detail, right, and attaches that particular SIM card to you. So that's one very successful method, because what has happened is you're accountable for what happens with your SIM card. Then nowadays, if you're going across the border, you want to travel, you would actually have to do a biometric authentication at the border, at the airport, before you can actually leave or come in. Those kind of things, I would say little things, although they're not little, those kind of things actually keep people accountable for their actions. Then also you look at there's a trend, I won't say it's recent, but it's a trend of mobile banking apps now including biometric registration to their process. I think at a particular point, when the BVN system came out, you had to actually go and have your BVN done or your bank account will be blocked. Those things are in place, and I would say they're working pretty well. I mean, there can always be improvements, but those things are in place to ensure that if you were to commit a crime with your bank account, you can be tracked. It's not just things are not just done at random anymore. And I would say those are kind of implementations that have been successful in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ileri. I think there, like you said, there could actually be improvements on the use of biometric authentication implementations. For example, you mentioned account opening and registration of SIM cards and all of that stuff. So if you're actually walking into a bank at the moment to create a new bank account for yourself, you have to go through the biometric registration, right? You have to capture your fingerprints, thumbprints, your full palm. Well, I think something fintechs and banking organizations need to also consider is how to actually match that particular biometric information to the secondary biometric information that is actually being supplied by users of their mobile apps. Let's say I'm actually opening an account with Bank ABC at the moment, and I've provided my fingerprints. Then a couple of days later, I'm actually getting access to their mobile application, and I'm being asked if I would like to authenticate to the application with my fingerprint or face ID or whatever. There needs to be more that should be done regarding verifying if this identity I'm actually providing, the biometric identity I'm providing on this mobile app at the moment actually matches the same identity I provided when I was enrolling for that bank account. I think that's actually one place where we need to learn how to implement the right technology in improving that particular aspect of biometric authentication. So, Nelson, we see these fraud tactics evolving every day. How can Nigerian organizations adapt their anti-fraud strategies to stay ahead of emerging threats and trends? These guys are always going to keep coming up. They are going to come up with new ways of breaking into our systems. How can organizations, especially financial organizations, stay ahead of this trend?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think some of those security measures have really been mentioned here on the call. And I think it was Goodness that specified talks more about continuous training and awareness. I think that is very key. I think that's where we need to really start from the user element. The common saying that we human beings are like the weakest element. So and he also did made mention about not just awareness but strategic and effective. So awareness now can be because the question is coming from Nigerian organization. Now, taking like the financial services sector, where you are interfacing with the common man out there, people that doesn't even know about technology. So we have to now take this awareness campaign to the grassroots level, right? Through different media. So and different language, our local language. I think, let me give for example, if you notice this year, right, this year alone we've recorded a lot of fraud cases. I was going through the recent financial forum that was conducted, and you could get the analysis to say even in quarter one alone, the number of fraud cases that was reported as a result of like the cashless policy was overwhelming. Now, we were going on to a new level of, bringing more digitalization to Nigeria. But I think little was done around awareness to say, okay, if we're doing a lot of more cashless, transaction, people will be encouraged to use different applications, buy, and do a lot of transaction online with their apps, wallets and all. We also need to do that sensitization. I know that banks do send emails, but not everybody gets emails. So how can we get this training, this campaign? And thanks to the committee of CISOs, I think they recently have this partnership with, CBN, the NIBSS, then also Cybersafe Foundation, to drive this security culture on how to be safe. I think that's the first thing we need to do. Educate, everyone, because if you're providing digital services, and you expect people to use applications, they need to be safe, right? They need to know how to be safe, how to identify scammers. You will also notice that a lot of people start getting fake SMS. You do online transaction and somebody is sending a fake SMS. A lot of people are scammed through. So how do they report cases like this? How do they ensure that these kind of issues don't happen? So awareness training is a continuous thing. It's a journey. And the committee was saying it's going to take 2 years. I think for me, it's a continuous thing. You just keep repeating this awareness, especially at the grassroots level, because a lot of people that are being scammed are not just organizations. They are individual people, small, medium businesses, entrepreneurs. So that's where I want to start from, right? Secondly, it's around for applications that like wallets, e-payment system. We want to ensure like more multi-factor authentication. We have banks, almost all the banks these days, you have a web payment channel, wallets, our mobile application. We need to enforce more multi-factor authentication. I said it earlier, like 2FA, even on our social media platform, right, would deter a lot of cyber attacks. Even you making mistake to give out your username and password, there's still this second control layer that is, making sure that data breach is not going. So how do we have to now say, making sure that we have policies. I know that these policies are in place through regulatory standards to say, okay, internet-facing applications that are new wallet system, e-payment platform have 2FA, strong authentication, very key. My brother have just talked about biometrics, right? Then also for businesses, Nigeria organizations should now do more robust KYC best practices. I think that the more we beef up KYC practices, yes, it might be a bit discomforting, right? But I think it's for the best. Making sure that you strengthen that customer verification process before you onboard customers, so that you are not onboarding somebody that is just creating an organization and you are not asking where the fund is coming from. So you want to make sure that before you do partnership with people or other businesses, you want to conduct your due diligence. I think those are the major things. And one of the last thing I want to talk about is security measures, aside from getting compliance, because security is a continuous thing. It's always updating. So we have organizations having internet-facing applications that are out of date. So we need to ensure, because these guys, a lot of these fraudulent attempts are also exploiting, aside from phishing, they're also exploiting vulnerable applications, not just internet-facing, but in-house applications. I think the culture of patch management, continuous security update, and software update is something that needs to be, encouraged across industry, not just having the tools themselves. But, for example, recently Cisco was talking about, 0 days, right? These are Cisco routers that are internet facing. Within a week or two, we heard that tens of thousands of Cisco routers were breached. So imagine that every other thing was right. You have all this 2FA, and you have all this good KYC process, and every other thing. Your staffs, or you're doing a lot around security awareness training, but around the security measures, best practices in place, updating, patch management, for me is one of the critical issues that we face. We are always reactive, we are not proactive. So I would like to stop there because of time. Yeah, thank you.
So I think something I've actually experienced in previous places I've actually had to work is the constant tug of war between information security and the technology teams. You always find it difficult or find it stressful to get to implement recommendations from the information security team. And it's actually very good to see that you've actually been on both sides of that particular tug of war. So in your own experience, how do you work in collaboration with other executives, such as the chief information security officers, to actually ensure a holistic approach to fraud prevention and cybersecurity? How do you make it work?
Yeah, and thank you very much. I could start by saying that the way they can make it work is to go outside and actually fight each other hand to hand, but that just betraying a joke out there. And what you say truly is that's exactly what we see. We see it just about in every organization where the man who drives technology and the man who drives security, they are always at parallel, all right? They're always at loggerheads, and it's a constant battle. It will always be a constant battle because, and especially in Nigeria, I'll give you the context of Nigeria, because initially we have always had the role of the CTO, or in most instances they call them the CIO. We have really never had the role of the CISO, going back in history. So we have just started to see the role of the CISO in recent times. Okay, CBN, for example, recently reintroduced. 2011, when CBN first introduced the CBN IT blueprint for the banks, deposit money banks. I think they have revised it again sometime in 2014. When they came up with that IT blueprint, again, the role of the CISO was not even properly defined. Okay, it was that organizations should begin to implement some security initiatives, PCI DSS and ISOs, a couple of things on the core as a way of combating fraud and all of that. So what happened for the banks and the financial institutions was that they used someone, typically the CTO, to able to achieve those security initiations, because the thought at the time was that security was all about. So why don't we just use the CTO to achieve the security initiatives? And that's what was doing. I mean, we saw that playback from 2011 when I was trying out consulting work for the banks. And but then at some point, CBN became advised, right? Because the advice was that security, combating fraud is not really about technology. Okay, it's more than just technology. It's more about the people. It's more about the processes. It cuts across the whole organization from top down. So what had happened is that the CBN now came up with a risk-based cybersecurity framework. The risk-based cybersecurity framework now specified in detail the role of the CISO, and the fact that, in fact, not just gave the role of the CISO, but even specified the level that the CISO must occupy in the banking hierarchy. And what's the word? Salary ranking, all of that. So you have banking officer, APU. So the CISO must be an AGM and above. All right. So now that's now that from the regulatory point of view made them to be aware. However, organizations in organizations, that now became a problem. So you now have the fact that the CTO has always been a ranking person. Then all of a sudden, the typical CISOs, now CISOs may be a person working under the CIO or the CTO. All right, he may just be working. He may be a network security engineer. I mean, take a look at some of the CISOs there. All of them were either working under a CTO, for example, or working some sort of it's a sort of technology function. They were taken out of there. I mean, for those who appointed CISOs from within the bank, they were taken out of there and made those people the CISO of the bank, and now elevated them to that position that they were. All right, so you find that CISO and the CTO or CIO of the organization are having the same AGM level. That alone can bring a lot of issues. I've seen that happen in a couple of banks, and even a couple of banks, traditional banks that we have. All right, so it is going to become. So you see, I had to go back history lane just for us to understand. I mean, why this even happens. Okay, so we get to see more of that. Now, something else about what the CISO does, again, which is also not good, is because what the CISO is now doing is that he is not aligning his security objectives with the business objectives. The truth is that when it comes to the business, the security is just a support system. All right, just like technology automates the process, security helps to deliver those processes or those. Just like technology helps to automate services to customers, security helps to deliver those services securely. At the end of the day, both of them are doing the same real thing, as in they all want to do the same thing, just that you now have two people who are doing those different functions. All right, so when we go to those organizations and when we have conversations, one of the first things we usually discuss is that the fact that it's important that every single time, I mean, again, the center of most of these things is applications. Okay, you have applications that are providing services to customers. We always like to talk to CISOs and CTOs for them to sit down and go back to the drawing board and say, look, we are achieving the same objective. All right, and one of the things we can do is, rather than you, whatever initiative you want to put in place, why don't we sit down and discuss about those initiatives? We talk about DevOps as a new thing. Okay, new thing that as a way, like an agile kind of approach for churning out applications at the speed of business. We'll talk about DevOps. And now we have started to introduce security within the DevOps process. Security used to come as an afterthought. The same way we talked about the fact that the role of the CISO came after the role of the CTO has already been well established far in time. Okay, so it has now become imperative that because the CISO is coming late, so to say, in quotes, he will want to take a step back and begin to build security aligning to how technology is in place. So, for example, application development is one proper function of the CISO to develop applications that are used for providing services to customers. Rather than the CISO having to wait until the application is fully developed and then having to provide security, because he will tell you that no, that application cannot go live, for example, until I have actually scanned the application or have carried out vulnerability assessment and penetration testing my application. That alone is now going to take a lot of time, because you now begin to identify vulnerabilities or issues, and then you have to take it back again to the developers, and the developers will have a hard time trying to fix it with no guidance, and then the time taken to from the point of development to the point of going live for the application now stalls, simply because the CISO has been brought into that chain. So the CISO is supposed to create a strategy for him to integrate it from the beginning.
Thank you very much, Nelson. Goodness.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget to catch up on all the live shows right here on africatechradio.com.